Hi, everybody. This is Barb Sorrentino from ItalianGenealogy.blog. And today I'm here with Stephanie Longo, who is the author of several books on the Italians of Pennsylvania and also has a blog and also a podcast too that she works on. So welcome, Stephanie. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. So I usually start off with the typical question that I think we all have asked ourselves at what point in time. Why do I want to do this, and why do I want to find my ancestors?
So that was a it's been one of those things for me personally that really took over my entire life. My earliest memory is actually of me at 5 years old. My mother took me to Dino and Francesco's Pizzeria. It's in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. I'm from just outside of Scranton. And just to keep me well behaved, she took the placemat that had the map of Italy and she was tracing it with my finger. And she said, "My daddy's from here. My daddy's from here." And that always stayed with me from the time I was 5 years old. And as I was growing up, we knew bits and pieces of the family history, but really nothing to, hang our hats on. Like, this is the official history of the family. My grandfather died about 8 years before I was born, so I never knew him. My grandmother died when my mother was 10, so I didn't know her either. And it was one of those things where I knew if I wanted to find out, I had to do the research myself. So my mother knew that grandpa was born in a town called Guardia, and there's several towns called Guardia in Italy. So we had to go through a process of really trying to figure out which one it was. He was from Guardia Lombardi, but the way that it was pronounced by my mom was Guardia Lombardia. So I thought that it was in Lombardy, out by Milan. So there's actually a town called Villa Guardia there. So imagine the confusion that ensued while I was trying to figure all this out. And, it just took a very long time, but I'm glad that I did what I did. I ended up taking Italian when I was at the University of Scranton. I was a French major, and you had to take a second language to get a foreign language major. So I took Italian, ended up declaring it as a double major, really haven't looked back. Went through the whole process of researching the family history from both Guardia Lombardi in Avellino Province and Nicastro in Catanzaro in Calabria. And taking that on as my own. My parents divorced when I was 3. So even when I was 21, I felt so close to my Italian heritage that I changed my Lithuanian last name to my mother's maiden name. And I still have that to this day, obviously. So really, the heritage has become such an integral part of my life. I can't see my life without it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. My wife gave up now, but you looking for the dead relatives again? And I think it's inbred in some of us. I really do, because I have a lot of cousins, obviously coming from 2 Italian families, and one or two was kind of sort of interested, and the rest of them are just like, "Oh, well, that's nice. Let me move on."
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, we've had that in our family. There's some relatives that are just like, "Oh, yeah, that's nice." And there's other ones that are like, "Ooh, tell me more about this. Tell me some more of these stories." I've become the de facto family historian. I have all the old photos. I have all the old documents, as many as I was able to get. And it's an honor to be the one that's the custodian of these things now.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I really want to. I'm just looking for the right site to use to build a family book and put all the pictures in, because I'm the same way. My mom had a lot of photos, and just recently one of my cousins sent me a bunch, and so yeah, I do the same thing, and I created two Facebook groups, one for each side of the family, so people could post things privately, so everybody doesn't have to
Right.
feel that any photos they put out there the whole world is going to see, although they probably do anyway. My little history along the same line is I always loved looking at the old photos in
Hmm.
the family photo album, the black pages with the pictures stuck in there with the little corners and all of that. That's how old I am. And we have my great grandfather's, what I refer to as his calling card. And my mother always said, my father's family, but my mother would always say that your great grandfather, and he was a count in Italy. So after I did my DNA test, I started that that journey, I figured I was going to find him very, very easily. And I did find a reference to him, but I couldn't find the family, his family. And, but I did find my great grandmother, who was Caracciolo, and found that her family went back in Naples to 950 AD.
Oh, wow.
And started piecing this whole thing together, and called my cousin who lived with my grandmother. My grandmother died when I was about 10, and I wouldn't have asked her anyway. But I said, "Do you recognize this name?" And she says, "Well, yes, of course, that's Nanny's mother." And her name was Amelia. My first aunt was Emily, so same name, all that matched up and everything. But I'm one that I have to see records. I'm not buying it until I actually know. And eventually, through the Antonati and all of that, I was able to piece all of this thing together and found out that my grandmother's father, his family, my great grandfather on his side was Count Giacomo of Montebello in Calabria.
Oh.
His wife was Duchess Beatrice Capici Piccicelli from Capricotta, which is where he got from the Dukes of Capricotta on his card. But more importantly, her mom, my grandmother's mom, her great-grandfather was Prince Luigi Caracciolo di Torciarolo from Naples. And his wife was Marchesa Costanza Saluzzo. And through those families, I've traced myself back to the kings and queens of Aragon and Castile and France and every place else. So It's been really such an amazing journey. And like I said earlier, I don't like to just say that I'm there unless I know. So I eventually found somebody in the U.S. that does all this tracing and genealogy work, and he was able to confirm everything that I thought I knew. So, but anyway, that's my story. I didn't want to get into that.
No, I loved it.
I just did.
I loved it. It was great.
And on the other side, my mom's family, they were farmers from Torito.
Oh, wow.
And, back in the old country, my mom and dad never would have been in the same place at the same time or anywhere near each other because they came from vastly different families and backgrounds and, stations and all of that kind of stuff. But I was able to get her family back to about the 1750s and have tons and tons of records from both sides of the family. And what really confused me about my great-grandfather's family was that the Duchess, she inherited the title from her when her brother passed away. She became the Duchess, which is very, very, as you probably know, very rare in Italy,
right,
for her to get the title. There must have been nobody around. And she combined the family names Piramalo and Capici Piccicelli into one. And the only ones who have that family name in that side of the family were the ones who inherited the title after that and their descendants. My great-great-grandfather and his brothers and sisters still had the name Piramalo, only. Because I guess that's the way the Duchess wanted it.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I was able to eventually confirm that with cousins over there and then looking at the records. And when I was looking at the family history, I knew that had to be the family, but I wasn't sure because it didn't have all the names. And then finally, I was able to piece all that together and find my great-grandfather's my great-great-grandfather's brother and his family and descendants from there, and we all pieced it together. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it was all because of this one card that my grandmother brought from Italy with her father's name on it.
Wow. You never know. I mean, when I was telling my mother about something that I'm doing, it's either with one of my books or the podcast. It was definitely something related to my professional career. And she said, who would have ever thought that a placemat in a restaurant would have brought all this about? So you just don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
Yeah, you don't know where the
Exactly.
inspiration comes from.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think it's something inside of us that makes us do it, whether it's preordained or karma or just by accident. I don't know, but there seems to be everybody I talk to. There seems to be one or two people in every family that
Yeah,
has this bug.
it's true. I got really lucky because I wanted something that was mine. You know, when you grow up in a divorced home, you don't really necessarily feel that there's something that's yours because you're either dealing with going to your father's house every other weekend or whatever's going on. And you needed something to hold on to. And it just so happened my mother was the full custodial parent. She loves telling stories of the old days. She loves telling me, you know, what it was like when she was a kid. And it just naturally progressed into that. And instead of it being my family's story, it became my story. And it was something that I had that was uniquely mine when, there were all these other things going on when I was in high school, especially with my father and just some custodial things um, after he remarried. It wasn't the time for me to really have something that I could say this is mine when, you're an adolescent, you're a teenager, you think that your whole life is in flux. This became mine. This became that thing that I knew was mine. And, I'm so thankful. My mother and I are extremely close. And this is one way of continuing her story and also making that story into mine.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Wow, that's really neat. So you mentioned your books.
Yes.
I think you've written 3 so far
Yes.
about mostly about the Italians in Pennsylvania
Yes.
and Lackawanna and areas like that. So let's inform everybody about those.
Sure.
And how you started that.
Yeah, I was originally going to do a PhD in Italian, and unfortunately, those plans fell through. My program was canceled, and I ended up crossing paths with two men who are still friends and mentors to this very day, Dominic Candeloro and Jerry Crace. Both of them, I'm going to say titans of the Italian American field because they really are. Every time that they come out with something, I get super excited. And I met them at the Italian American Studies Association's conference that was in Washington, D.C. at that time. And they took me under their wing. Dominic got me my first book contract with Arcadia Publishing. He said to me, and I didn't even know who he was at the time. He just sat down next to me and struck up a conversation and, where are you from and what are you doing? And I told him my sob story of my program getting canceled. And he's like, did you ever think of writing a book? And I was like, yeah, but you can't get published. It's so hard to get published. He's like, no, I could help you. And of course, I thought that he was nuts because I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, yeah, okay, you can help me get published. But I thought you have nothing to lose at this point. Your whole life is in shambles right now. Your PhD was just canceled. You're trying to figure out how to get home to Northeastern Pennsylvania. You're all over the place. And that Monday, I had an email from Arcadia Publishing. So I owe everything to Dominic and to Jerry. Jerry was so encouraging and so great about that. He ended up sitting on the other side of me, and it was like a sandwich with these two amazing men on either side of me telling me, like, you need to do this. You need to do this research. And I've been doing it ever since. It's, let me see, that was 2004. So, I mean, about 16 years ago, I've been doing this for 16 years. It's amazing. And I love doing it. I can't see my life in any other direction.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I've started mine, and originally I was I was tying it all together with like DNA and all of that, and then I decided that's not really the way to go. I really should just tell the stories of the two families, and and connections to other members of the family that I found, whether it be in Italy or here, and how we met and all that kind of stuff. And I had hoped to finish it after we came back from Italy in April, but that didn't happen.
Oh, I know. COVID has everything messed up. I'm doing a research project for a local Italian American company, and it's very intense because it's the company history as well as a little bit of a genealogy on the family. And all I've been able to do is just Zoom meetings where I'm able to sit down with the people I need to interview and then some research on newspapers.com. But I'm the type, I love digging in archives, and I can't get to any of them right now. So I'm trying to do whatever I can, but it's stunted the progress of this research. And I'm sad about it because I said, I'll be able to get this done in about a year, 2 years. And, I lost a big chunk of that first year. So we'll see how everything goes.
Yeah, and I had it set up. I connected with somebody over there. Her company is called Italy Rooting, and what she does.
I know.
Oh,
her.
so you know that?
Yes.
Yeah, right. She's really, really great.
Oh, yeah.
And she wouldn't tell me everything that she was going to do, but she gave me a little bit of insight, and we were going to go to Capricata, where the Duchess's home is the current town hall. So we were going to go there. We were going to go to some of the Piramalo homes down south. We were going to go to Avellino.
Nice.
Because my ninth great grandfather was Prince Marino Caracciolo, and he basically owned, Avellino and Etropalda and a few of the other towns around the area there. So she had some special things in store for us. So we're hoping now maybe we're going to be able to go the end of October.
Oh, nice.
And get all of that wrapped up.
It's fun. I mean, my first time in Guardia Lombardi, which is in Avellino Province, it was the most exciting time ever. And now that's like my other Italian home. But I've never been to Nicastro. Nicastro is now Lamezia Terme in Calabria. And I've just recently been able to get through my genealogical brick wall on my grandmother's side. So I'm very much looking forward to getting to Lamezia and seeing it. I just have more of a tie to Guardia, and I don't feel that that's fair to the Lamezia Terme, Nicastre's side of the family. I want to discover more of that as well and feel the same tie for both towns. I ended up posting a family photo of my grandmother's family in a Lamezia Terme Facebook group, and it got over 1,000 likes. And I've ended up finding distant relatives and learning different things about Calabria. And it's just been a really great time. So my plan is next year to be able to go over. I'm hitting the big 4-0 next March. So I decided I want to give myself a wonderful birthday present to hit 40. So I thought, you're going back to Italy. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, I'm working on the big 7-0 next year.
So see, you get a present too. You get to go back.
Yeah, exactly. And what's funny, we lived in England for a couple of years, and we made a trip to Sorrento, and we really didn't spend any time in Naples. Really just got off the train and got in a car and drove to Sorrento. And in doing my research, I found out that the street Via Carbonaro, where my great-grandparents lived and my grandmother lived, was a half a mile from the train station. So we were right there, and I had no idea. And they pretty much must have owned the whole block, because all the birth and death records all show them at number 23, number 25, number 28, number 32, Via Carbonaro.
Yeah, we have that in Guardia. It's Largo Capodaria. And the whole piazza, it's just Longos, the entire thing. And I was just like, wow, we have a really big family over there. And I mean, it's great. One thing that I would love to mention to your listeners, this came through my work with the Italian American podcast. I'm the associate producer there, and dream job to like the millionth degree. It's awesome. I love everything I do. But in a recent episode, we were talking about just things like ways to strengthen your ties to your Italian heritage during the quarantine lockdown. And one was, learning your regional language or learning the Italian language. And I'm fluent in Italian already. So I thought, I'm going to learn Napolitano. And I started learning that via Italki, the platform, and it's been so amazing. Getting to learn that regional language has opened me up to even more exciting things in terms of my Italian heritage, because now I'm able to understand a little bit more. My Aunt Jenny, I was very close to her. That was my grandfather's sister, and she unfortunately passed away several years ago. But she would tell me things, and some of them I would understand, some of them I wouldn't understand because I didn't speak the Guardiese. And the Neapolitan is close enough to Guardiese that now I understand a little bit of what she was talking about because I could still remember. But the cool thing is, Thanksgiving Day 1967, my aunt's family had my great grandmother over for Thanksgiving. And they were just kind of hanging out after dinner. They had some wine, and they got my great grandmother to sing songs. And Aunt Jenny, while she was still alive, gave me this cassette. I had it digitally remastered and placed on a CD. And I have the MP3s on my laptop now because I've been listening to them a lot lately. And I was able to pick up maybe 30% because she was singing in dialect. And now that I've learned this Napoletan, I'm by no means fluent. I'm doing it for the fun of it, and I love it. I'm able to understand about 80% now of what she's saying. And it makes me feel closer to my great grandmother now. Even though she died in 1975, I now feel like I have a little bit of a relationship with her because I understand what she's saying and I understand what was going on in this audio. So it's just been really, there's always something new to discover when you're doing family history or heritage research. And this has been my latest discovery, and I love it. I asked somebody in La Mezzia Terme now, they have a Lambettino dictionary. And I said, I want to buy this. Tell me how to get this to the United States. Because I figured if I could get through Neapolitan, they all share the same root language. Maybe I could get through the Calabrese as well. So I'm just thrilled. It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, that's great. I've started and stopped trying to learn Italian a few different times, and now I'm back to the level. I should really learn it. The interesting thing about what you're saying about the dialects is, my dad grew up in the Neapolitan household. My mom grew up in a Barese household, and they were always telling the other one, "You're not saying it right."
Right. Yeah. Right. My aunt would call my Italian the standard Italian, highfalutin Italian. That was what she'd call. Oh, Stephanie, you know what? You speak the highfalutin Italian. She would understand it, but when she would respond to me, I'd have a very hard time understanding her. And I wish that she was here now so this way I could demonstrate some Neapolitan with her and see what she would say.
Yeah, well, and the Barese is way out there.
Yeah.
They chop off everything. And I always thought, growing up, you would hear that. I always thought that's Italian. And then when I started taking it to school, I'm like, where did this all come from?
Yeah, it's really crazy how the regional languages and dialects change. I did a blog post on my blog about Neapolitan versus some of the Irpinian dialects. And in Guardiese, there's two different ways to conjugate acid depending on when you learned Guardiese. So my great grandmother obviously spoke the old form of it, but now there's like a modern form of Guardiese. And if I didn't know that, I would have absolutely no idea what she was saying in this audio. It's crazy. You're looking at it, it looks like Russian or something that's so far from Italian that you have no clue what it is. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, I know. And for example, my uncle Dominic was, the way we learned it was Zimanguch, which was like, now when I'm looking at this, where did this come from?
Yeah.
I did want to ask you a little bit about the blogs too, because first of all, I love your layout. I want to steal that. I got to figure out how to do that on WordPress. I think it's really a neat way of showing the.
Thank you.
The posts.
It's the template.
I have a list, and this is nice. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I have to look for a template like that.
I'll get you the name of the one that I used, and I'll send it over to you.
Oh, great. But what I find interesting about your posts is a lot of it is more about, it's not so much researching family, but it's more about the culture.
Yes.
The languages. So being a genealogist, I guess, at heart, why did you go that way with your blog post?
The reason why I did that was because I think that everybody's family has a really cool story. And my family story is no better than yours, is no better than anybody else's. To me, it's the best because it's my own. But everybody feels that way. It's like, whose family member makes the best sauce? Well, they all do. It depends on who you're talking to and what you're looking for. I did not want anybody to be like, oh, this girl's just madly in love with her people and that's it. I'm in love with all Italian. I love everything from the north to the south to the islands that, Italy is mine. But I realized when I was learning about Irpinia, especially, Guardia is in Irpinia. There's so much to see there, and people don't realize that it's such an exciting part of Italy. And I thought, how can I start teaching people about this? Because you can't understand what your ancestor lived through if you don't understand the place they lived in. So I thought, I could start sharing some of these stories, my Irpinia stories, and telling people about some of the life there or the culture, the cuisine, the history, and they'll understand a little bit better this ambiance that their ancestor lived in. I thought that it would be a way too to engage people with modern Irpinia. So this way they could see what the land has become today versus when their ancestor left. I think it's important to see what it was like when they left, but it's also important to see what it's like today. So this way you could maybe make a heritage trip over there. And maybe there's something that somebody read on my blog that they're like, hey, if I make it to Avellino and my family's from Avellino, I want to go and check out this museum. This seems really cool. So it's more of a public service and an educational way to be able to show people what it's like, what's going on over there. And then I throw in some family stories here and there when I feel like it's time to write. You'll see a couple of them about my grandfather. I've written about my aunt. I've written about the time that my mother and I went to Guardia for the first time. I try to add that personal touch, but I really want it to be overall this resource for people that might be considering visiting Italy. And maybe they want to go off the beaten path. And to me, Irpinia is off the beaten path, but it's so worth going off of that path to see it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And that was one of the things when I was planning the trip with Letizia was that she said, you're going to see, she said, where I'm going to take you, she says, you're going to see how different everything is in every place. She says, you know what you know because you've been there and you spent a little time in Naples. She says, but every region is almost like it's not even like it's its own little state. It's almost like it's its own little country.
Exactly. And that's why the tagline on the site is every place has a story. Because even just different towns in Irpinia, if you look at my most recent post, which was about the Neapolitan versus Guardiese versus the Gesualdo dialect, you could even see just how these dialects and regional languages, Neapolitan is the regional language, and then Guardiese and Gesualdino would be a dialect of Neapolitan. You could see how different they are. And I mean, they're only about 10 minutes away from each other. It's crazy. So, you try to show people what this is. And it's fascinating. I love being a part of this.
Yeah, and I got some great stories from my oldest uncle. On my mom's side, he lived in Italy and his whole family was born there till 1950. So when my grandparents came, he was about 2 or 3. And my grandparents came because my grandfather had served in the Italian army during one of the Libya campaigns. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother says, you're not going back to war again. This was, 1914, 1915. And they intended, I think, to go back to Italy, which I think a lot of people did too.
Right.
But they got here. He started working. My grandmother's brother was here, and my grandfather was delivering ice and all of that. And they started raising their family. When my uncle wanted to come, because he didn't want to leave his grandparents, when he wanted to come, he was of age. He had to go in the Italian army. He wound up getting married, mm-hmm. having his family, and then he couldn't come.
Right.
So they lived till around 1949, 1950, came into Canada for several years because they couldn't come right into America. And so I have some great stories from them firsthand growing up during the war. My grandfather taking, or my great grandfather taking my uncle around Torito with the cow and milking the cow. If you wanted milk, he was the milkman. So they would come
Right.
up to the door. I guess you'd say you want a pint, a quart, whatever you want, and he'd milk the cow right in front of the door.
Oh, wow.
And my uncle, yeah, and my uncle and my cousins all lived in my great grandfather's house, 2-room house.
Oh,
And the way they explained it was 2 rooms. One room had a door where my aunt and uncle lived, and the newest born baby. Everybody else was in the other room with the hearth and their beds. No bathroom outside, and we're talking the 40s.
yeah, it's crazy. The stuff that you find out, the stuff that you learn. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Aunt Jenny told me the story of when they came to the United States. You know, my grandfather was about 11 years old. She was about 5. And my uncle Angelo was the man. He was the grown up at this point because he was 16. And then they were taking my great grandmother. My great grandmother in Italy, while they were building the house on Via Capodaria, she unfortunately had an accident and fell and had to have one of her legs amputated. So she almost didn't get into the United States because of that. But my great grandfather, to his credit, when he settled in Dunmore and he was ready to come to send for his family, he actually had them come over second class because he knew if she came over third class with this amputation, she might not get in. So he paid for her to go in the better class. They actually were in their own cabin and everything. They did not go steerage. But the night before they were ready to leave, Uncle Angelo at this point had become fidanzato with a young lady in Guardia. And he went and broke all the windows in Guardia's town hall, got himself arrested, and ended up having to stay. That young lady is my Aunt Maria Michaela. And he did not come to the United States until about the 1960s, the late 1950s, I'm sorry. So he actually knew my grandmother before she died. So Uncle Angelo had a delayed arrival. He did not come in 1927 with everybody, but the family portrait, which is the last one they took before they left Italy, has Uncle Angelo in it. So, you know, Nicoletta actually brought that portrait with her from Guardia through Ellis Island. She carried it on her back. And before she died, Aunt Jenny handed that down to my mother and me. It's in our dining room now. It's my most prized possession. If I die without children, it's going in my will that it has to be donated to the museum in Guardia.
Wow, that's a great story. And that happened to my uncle. My uncle they were supposed to come, the whole family, and my cousin Antoinette, she had a liver disease that they think, at least what they say is that they think she got it from sheep, some kind of disease that she got from sheep. And they were ready to come. They were all ready to come over, and she was sick, and they knew she wasn't going to get through. So they had to delay the trip. In the meantime, and I guess they must have lost the money. I guess when you pay, you pay. You know, back then there was no insurance or anything, right? So a little while later, the quote unquote businessman came to Torito from Canada looking for workers to work on the mushroom farm, and the town knew that, you know, my uncle's family was all here and all his brothers and sisters and everything. So they collected to send him over because you had to pay the businessman for the honor of going to work in Canada. And he came over and he was on the ship for almost 2 months. They had no word. They had no idea if he made it, if he didn't make it. When he got to Canada, his visa had run out. So they had to, I don't think he was in jail, but he had to stay someplace with the state until they verified who he was and all of that kind of stuff. And so he was in America for quite some time, you know, by himself. And then eventually they were able to work it out so my cousin could come over. And then, like I said, they had to spend several years in Canada.
Right.
But I have great movies. of my parents and my aunts and
Aw.
uncles, going to visit them in Canada, my grandmother in Canada visiting him. And just recently, um, one of my cousins who helped translate the interview that my cousin Joey did with his father in Bades, they finally translated it for me, where I got some of these stories. She sent me a picture of my uncle and the brothers and sisters all at the table together for the first time.
Oh, oh, that's
So,
awesome.
so the first time he met his brothers and sisters ever, and he hadn't seen his parents in 45 years.
Oh, wow. Oh,
So, that's what makes, to me, that what makes this all worthwhile,
yes,
because like same thing in your case, if I wasn't doing this, we would never know.
exactly. That's how I ended up being an Italian dual citizen. I mean, it was through my family history research. Um, we only had at that time one photo of my great grandparents on my grandmother's side, and it was pretty beat up. It was beat up. It was a family portrait, the one I actually shared on the La Mezzia Terme group. And you couldn't see my grandmother's face. My grandmother was 2 when this picture was taken. And unfortunately, her face had a bit of a scratch through it. The baby that my great grandmother was holding had a scratch. I mean, it was just a beat up old photo. It was a shame. And I thought, well, there has to be a photo on his citizenship certificate. So I contacted the federal courthouse here in Scranton. They let me go through their microfilm, and there was nothing there. And come to find out, I went through the National Archives and everything. They filed a declaration of intent, but they never renounced their Italian citizenship. And I thought, that's crazy. So we ended up, because of when my mother was born in 1948, June 8th, 1948. After January 1st, 1948, you could claim it through your mother's line. So we ended up claiming the dual citizenship. And fortunately, one of our cousins had a beautiful version of the photo and made a copy of it for me. So I do have the photo without the scratches, and it's definitely very precious. It also hangs in our dining room, but I've also seen other photos of that side as well through the years, and I have a lot of copies of those as well. Getting to see them and getting to learn more about them was great, but really diving in and finding these things out, even to declare our dual citizenship, I found out that my grandmother's birth certificate isn't even under the name that we knew her as. It was under Annie Salvatore, and her name was Anna Mascaro. And for whatever reason, they didn't use the Mascaro last name until about the late 1930s. My grandparents were married. Her name is Mascaro, but under the census, it's always under the last name Salvatore. And in my great-grandfather's obit, it said he was also known as Mike Salvatore. My mother even has a prayer book, and it's the one that my grandmother carried at her wedding, and it's signed from the priest to Annie Salvatore. So we were confused all these years. So, getting to do that, getting to find out that we get the dual citizenship, and, learning, okay, that's why the Salvatore last name was there. His name was Salvatore Mascaro, so I think he just wanted to be more Americanized. But, now all these people have a full story, and they come to life. They're not just names on a tombstone anymore. They're real, living, breathing people.
Yeah, I think that's what's great about it.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Italian American podcast.
Yes.
I'm a little bit jealous because I think you probably have a couple more listeners than me. But I'm just starting out, and I do this more for the fun, and anybody wants to listen to it, they can listen to it. But so you said it was the dream job. How did you land that? And tell us a little bit about what the podcast does.
I still pinch myself every day that I landed this job. It does not even feel like I am working. And I think that's definitely the sign that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing when you don't feel that you're going to work every day. And everything I do, I'm excited by. So I'm just so blessed and so thankful. It's an amazing team. And I can't believe I'm there. I saw it on Facebook. I saw that they were looking for somebody on Facebook. I thought they're never going to hire me because I'm in Pennsylvania and this is New York City. But I thought you will also never forgive yourself if you don't apply. So I applied, and I thought I'll never hear from them again. And then I got called in for an interview, and then another interview. Then I got offered, and here I am. I was just ecstatic. I don't know how I could ever thank them for having me to be a part of their team. It's really an amazing place to work. Everybody is so passionate about their heritage, and you can't have a bad day when you're surrounded by people with the same passion that you have. It bolsters you. It makes you more excited about what you're doing. And what they're doing for the Italian American community is so vitally important because it's uniting generations. It's giving people the chance to tell their stories, and it's also educating people. And we need something like that because I think that, unfortunately, the Italian American community, people don't know much about us. They associate us with eating pasta, having awesome desserts, and drinking wine. Like, that's it. And I mean, food is a big part of our culture, don't get me wrong, but we have other exciting things to tell people. And this podcast gives the opportunity for people to really learn about the Italian American culture. It's just amazing to be a part of this and to really see how all of it comes together. I don't go to work every day. I go and have fun every day. And I think that says it all. It's really a wonderful place.
There's a lot to be said about and really loving your job. I've known very few people who totally love their job. And one of them was my dad, because my dad was a staff photographer for the New York Daily News for
that had to be
38
fun.
years. And, he saw just about everything. And he loved his job. I mean, several times they wanted to make him a boss, and he didn't want it. He wanted to be on the street and take pictures. That's what his passion was. And my cousin Paul was also a staff photographer for the Daily News. A couple of my cousins also went into the business. There were so many photographers that, my brother and I, although he dabbled in it, we were like, there's enough photographers. We need to do something else. But he saw just about everything. And that's, somebody just said the other day, you should do a book about that. And I said, I would. I said, but the Daily News owns the photos.
Right.
They're not my dad's photos. They're their photos. And you would have to, pay the royalties and all of that. But prior to that, for a few years, he also did newsreels for WPIX, Channel 11. He loved his job, and we were kind of superstars in College Point, New York, because every once in a while, quite often, Dad would have the front page, or he'd have the centerfold with all his pictures in it, and I'd go to school, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Hey, your dad had the pictures in the front page, or your dad had the centerfold, and we were always in the paper.
Yeah.
Every time there was a snowstorm or a hurricane, we were in the picture.
Well, sure, because you were the easy models.
Yeah, exactly. Jump in the pool, shovel the snow, do that kind of stuff. Well, Stephanie, I really appreciate that. This has been a lot of fun. It always is. I enjoy this so much doing it. I don't have the dream job, but I do enjoy doing this and talking to people with similar interests, and hear the passion that everybody has.
Yeah, I think it's that passion that really makes people want to do more. You feed off of other people's passion, and we all help each other go forward, and it's important. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. I'll get you the information for WordPress too. Okay, great. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook in the Italian Genealogy group, or at www.italiangenealogy.blog.